Coming up on today's episode of Parasport Nation, Nathan and I dive into a debate all around the sports featured at the Paralympics and those not at the Paralympics. We cover everything from athlete classification to the sports we think deserve a spot in the games. You won't want to miss it. Let's get started.
Welcome to Parasport Nation with Alex Smyth and Nathan Clement.
Welcome into Parasport Nation. I'm your host, Alex Smyth, as always, joined by co-host Nathan Clement. Nathan, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm on Vancouver Island for the week, so I'm really excited to be over here, enjoy the island life for a little bit.
Well, hopefully it's cooler for you because where I am in the GTA, it is boiling, it is in the 40s, it's hot, it's spicy, just like our takes are going to be on today's episode. But before we get into any of that, you have the PSN update. Take it away, sir.
Now, the PSN update.
It was a flurry of baskets in deep for Canada's U23 wheelchair basketball team as Canada wrapped up the IWBF U23 Wheelchair Basketball World Championships with a triumphant 73-33 dub over Israel. The next major tourney on the hard court is the 3-on-3 Open World Championships in Sun City, South Africa in August. In BC's Sun City of Victoria, the 2025 BC Provincial Boccia Championships have been anointed. Nathan Bragg took the BC 1 class, while Dan Hutchinson took the open category. Switching gears, we get on the tarmac as the 2025 Canadian Road Cycling Nationals begin in Quebec on the 27th. Follow PSN for all the updates, and that's the PSN update.
Nathan, obviously it's a big win for Canada's under-23 team. How does that set them up going forward? Because I think that gives that momentum we always talk about.
Yes, anytime you want to end a tournament on a high, that's a great thing going forward. Obviously, a 9th place is a tough thing, especially when you were that close to the knockout round. But I think overall, it's just great learning experiences. And we've talked about this in the past, is sometimes you have to lick your wounds, take your punches so you can really grow and expand going forward. But I'm really excited to see the 3-on-3 tournament come to life because I know this has been at the Commonwealth Games in the past, but this is the first major world championship. So it's going to be really interesting to see what does Canada's men's and women's roster look like. And even if we can get some young blood, some young talent up there, I think this is going to be a really exciting evolution of the sport coming to the mainstream now.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about that strategy. You know, you have more space to play with. Are you going to change the type of players you have on the court at a certain time? Maybe someone who's a bit more adept at getting in managing those open spaces, or you get someone who's kind of better at a broad defense instead of kind of locking up with someone. It's always exciting when there's a new format, a new wrinkle to a sport that is well known and well beloved comes into the fray. I'm excited to check that out. For you, unfortunately, you're going to be missing out on a road championships in Quebec. How are you feeling as your teammates gear up on the 27th?
Obviously, I wish I would be there to spend time with him because it's always amazing, not just the racing side, but just having that time with friends, people that you spend many months of the year on the road with. They really become your family at points. So it's going to be difficult to not see them and not be able to celebrate their successes and also just lay it out on the road with them. But to be here in Victoria right now and kind of opening the door of what's going on, why I'm in Victoria is through the classification process. I need to really find ways to describe my condition to the UCI or the Union Cycliste Internationale. So I'm in Victoria, going to be meeting with a specialist here, really trying to diagnose and break down my dystonia as well as different parts of my condition. But being in Victoria, I'm also going to be riding, experiencing the island. So I'm really looking forward to that, but I really wish I was there with teammates.
What is the riding conditions like when you compare Vancouver to Victoria? Is there a lot of difference? Because obviously Victoria is a much smaller city than Vancouver is, but are there other differences you feel when you're riding on the island?
I haven't really spent that much time riding on the island so far, but I know from the odd times I have, it's a lot more open in the way with Vancouver being a city of 2 to 3 million people. It's a lot bigger, and that city core, pretty well, you can be stuck in it for hours training and riding. But here with Victoria, you have that aspect and you have that opportunity to get out of the cities and actually ride from town to town. And there's a lot of open stretch roads. But I know I rode in on Sunday from the Schwartz Bay Ferry, which is about a 35-kilometer ride into downtown Victoria. And it was just so beautiful riding along the coast, being able to see the Olympia mountain range in the distance in the United States, but also all the coastal islands. So it's very, very unique. It's not as hilly. It's not as steep as Vancouver or the Lower Mainland, but it's definitely has its own uniqueness. So it's just exciting to explore and see a new part of your province in this way.
Well, you know what else is exciting? Is whenever we get comments or questions or feedback from the fans, from the audience. This is always something we love to encourage. And folks at home, if you are watching, you are listening, you got a question for us, be sure to send it our way, because we had a comment on a recent episode, and it really, I think this is going to be a great start for a conversation. So let me read this message here from one of our viewers. I wish a segment would delve into the subject of events that were not chosen by the IPC. I don't get the metrics and the politics behind why certain events are/aren't selected. Just can't seem to find a fresh topic on YouTube covering the 12 para-climbing events, among others, specifically being excluded from LA for 2028 since the announcement on what would be added just happened this week. And that is from I Am Not Lion on YouTube. Nathan, first off, before we actually dive into a full conversation, what do you make of the comment?
I appreciate the comment, and for any viewers or listeners, please feel free to add more questions and comments, because it's really allowed us to think about and debate this topic too, even before we've gotten on air, because it really shows that it's amazing when we get these kind of messages. But for us, there's so many intricacies with parasport, and it's a great topic that we've even learned so much about in the process of receiving it. So it's great for us. So we really appreciate it as the PSN team.
Yeah, and so focusing in on the paraclimbing event specifically, you know, there's a lot been said, because that's the one that was specifically mentioned. There are only a handful of the classifications that are going to be a part of the program for LA 2028. I actually have them up here. So you have the B1 category for the men, the B2 category for women, the RP1 for men, RP1 for women, the AU2 for men and women, and the AL2 for men and women included. So of, you know, a nearly 20 different classifications, different subsects of the different classifications. For instance, like B1, B2, B3. The men's only have the B1 competition. The women only have the B2. What are your thoughts on the fact that this is the first introduction for paraclimbing, and it's a very small field, only 4 medals for men, 4 medals for women for events?
I think it's amazing anytime you can get a sport involved to the games, especially a sport like paraclimbing that has always been on that cusp and has really grown. We've had multiple members of the team or organized in the sport on the program, but it's one of those tough things when you can only have multiple categories at a games, at an event like this. And often what goes on, as I have some sources and have been privy to different events for various sports and meetings, the biggest thing that a lot of new sports struggle with is getting the right amount of field of competition and also categories involved in the games. And this has happened in years past with paratriathlon, and even more specifically with paracycling, as we're often fighting against other sports in the way of these sports competing against each other for eyeballs, but also quota spaces, as there's a lot of logistics behind venue planning, behind different rosters and different people that are even allowed into the village. So it becomes a really tricky thing where we want every single sport to have their categories and classes. But it's very difficult when you can only have, say, the B1 or the B2 or even a very small contingent in there, because you're also excluding so many other athletes. And just from cycling, we have factor times just so we're able to get more than one category in there. But it's a very, very tricky slope. But Alex, how do you think this compares to other sports, sort of like the classification bases like swimming, cycling, or even like wheelchair tennis?
Yeah, I think there's definitely some similarities in certain sports. I look at the wheelchair tennis program for the LA Games. You have the kind of the different categories for the lower limb, upper limb for the men and women. But then when it comes to the quad category, that's just an open competition. So men and women competing together. I think that's also a approach where it's like, well, is that really giving the best opportunity for any women who would be in that quad division to excel or reach the podium? Most likely not. I understand there has to be that balance of, okay, what's the field like? We want a competitive competition. We don't want like 2 or 3 athletes in a single division and that's it. You want to have a strong field that represents international strength of competition. But you look at something like swimming and cycling. Unfortunately, Nathan, we're picking on your 2 sports. You look at the sheer volume of swimming in the number of different races, different classification. I think because they're kind of the darlings of the Paralympics, the same thing can be said for like athletics. There is just such a large program that you get this disproportionate opportunity if you're an athlete in the pool opposed to being on a tennis court or trying to do climbing. I would love to see a bit more of a balance. Maybe you don't have, the 25 meter, the 50 meter. Maybe you just have 100 meter, 200 meter, 400 meter, and not all these different subsects in between. Maybe you have some competitions are just 4x100 medley instead of the individual strokes that are also under separate categories. And we've had this conversation before when it comes to the varying medal tallies, and it always feels a bit unfair for me if anyone's on a team sport or individual sport like tennis. You only have an opportunity at one medal, opposed to if you're a swimmer in multiple different races, you can rack up those wins really easily.
Yeah, that's the ultimate debate and question, because we can even go into the Olympic side where you have many athletes, whether it's in the winter or summer, that have won over 20 Olympic medals, but then you have someone who can only specialize in one event and they may have won 3 or 4. So that often comes up in the who's the greatest Olympian or even who's the greatest Paralympian of all time, because you have different sports stacked against each other. But one thing with swimming too, and it's not really a defense of the sport, but swimming has also taken away a lot of events as well. Like, for example, when I was an S6 swimmer, I could only do 50 free and 50 butterfly, 100 free, 100 back, 100 breast, and then it would be only available to 200 IM and 400 free. So there's multiple events that are taken away too, but that's just one of those tricky things of how do you balance these legacies of sport? Because that's often what comes down to quotas is, one, the sport's legacy, but also that viewership and just each sport kind of competing and going against each other in a way where there's a lot of sports like athletics that just have a massive base, and a lot of those bases have been shrunk down. And we've talked about this too, is there's a lot of athletes who have represented Canada or represented other countries in the past who are incredible athletes, but because of quota spacing and because of selections, they maybe only been to 1 games, or not even that, where they dominate at a world championships, but because of their categories, depth, field of size, they're not going to be able to compete at a Paralympics. So it becomes a very tricky situation situation when you look at depleting sports or depleting events, but there's also that need and that expansion that is required too. And I feel like the IPC needs to find ways to really look at expanding these events so you can have more categories in paraclimbing, or I even want to use paratriathlon as an example here, where when paratriathlon came in 2016, we had a lot of athletes who would have been in the trike category or different handbike, or what they call WC, wheelchair, in paratri, go into different sports, whether it was cycling or swimming. So when you have a sport really deplete its classification or deplete its quota sizes or events, you often have other athletes going into different sports. So it becomes almost a blessing too, where you get other athletes into different sports as well. But obviously I want to see paraclimbing with that roster, same as every other sport. But talking about expansion, is there any other summer game sport that you would like to see at the Paralympics?
Yeah, I there's always new sports. I want to see as many sports as possible. Like, we have a episode coming up with Will Stevens from Trailer Park Sport Network. Sneak preview on that episode. He talks about wheelchair handball. I think that's an exciting new sport to explore. I think there's so many different parasports out there that are already have strong foundations, strong grassroots. But one I was actually thinking of today, I would love to see, it's kind of like a decathlon. You basically have a generalized athletics competition. You can just set up that it's like 5, 6, 7, 8, how many sports you want. But athletes go and they compete through every single one in a way that's accessible. So you have the different classifications, whether it's a VI classification or a wheelchair or upper limb, lower limb, CP, however you want to define it. I think that would be truly special, because not only are you so specialized in a single sport or event or race, which we tend to see from some athletes, and they do tremendous jobs at it, but you can find who is truly one of the greatest all-around athletes, someone who can compete in a variety of disciplines all in this one competition. I think that would be truly special, and that would be something that would elevate the Paralympic experience. What about you, Nathan? Is there one that you would love to see included?
Your point you just brought up has really got me thinking. Almost there is something that we have in paracycling. I'm going to focus on paracycling first. We have what's called the Omnium. So it's a variety of different events, whether it's sprints, it's a match race where everyone's going head to head, an endurance race, elimination race. And what's very unique about that is, especially with a sport like paracycling on the track, it's kind of like we have a lot of catch-all categories. So it's a wide range of function and disability in there. So you often have riders who have certain skills based off their condition, but also areas they may struggle in because of their disability. So it's a very unique thing of seeing how some people will start a race versus how they will finish, because it often changes with their disability and their condition. But a summer sport I would really hope to see and hope to expand on. I'm going to go give a little blast to the past here. I wish parasailing would come back. I feel like that was just a beautiful display of technology and advancement, but also the ability of the athletes to think on a dime, think about the movement, motion. I would really love to see that come back. But a part of this conversation we've had so far, we're talking about expansion, but also capping and limiting events. Do you think there needs to be a limit on the amount of sports at the games, or do you think there needs to be almost like an expansion, like what an NHL or a major league would go through every single cycle or quadrennial?
I think in today's day and age, there is enough media attention. I mean, we went through the numbers on a previous episode, just the viewership, topping over 1 billion kind of viewers through the Paris Paralympics. There is the appetite there. Add more variety, add more games. There's no reason to be shy now about, expanding the opportunity for competition and exposing people to new competition. I'm all for that. I think there needs to be a bit of scrutiny, or not necessarily scrutiny. You know what? I'll stick with scrutiny. I'm going to be a bit controversial. I think certain sports need to be expanded to different classifications. I look at something like boccia. I look at something like goalball. Two mainstays in the Paralympic movement, but they are only for very specific disability classifications. Why don't we expand it? Why don't we open up bocce and goalball to have different types of classifications, different competitions, but still keep the same core of the game? Maybe you have goalball being played with people with limb loss or with functional movement limitations. You still have them wearing the eye shades because that's still the sport, but you have them competing in a different format or a different kind of way of playing the same sport based around their disability. I think that would be really exciting. It would add a new twist and a new appreciation to games that are kind of in sports that have always been kind of off to the sidelines. They're not the kind of the main marquee events of the Paralympics, but they still have their place. One other thing too, Nathan, because I want to make sure we get to this aspect. I want your response first in terms of like, where do you think there could be room for growth or expansion, or maybe a disability subsect that could be grown or expanded upon in the games? And then I want to talk about the venues as well, because I think that's part of this conversation also when it comes to LA.
I really think from a personal aspect, as someone who's been involved with the Canadian Cerebral Palsy soccer development program in the past, but also is a big fan and big friend of those guys, is seeing para soccer make its return, especially on the CP category, as that is a major hole I think that's missing in the Paralympic Games, where five-a-side is beautiful, amazing. We saw the scenes that took place under the Eiffel Tower at Paris, but we need more expansion of that side of CP there. But I also see short statured as a category that's really missing in a lot of sports. Like I know athletics as well as powerlifting and swimming have taken the charge there, but there definitely needs to be an expansion there. But also, and I would love your take on this, Alex, what do you think of an expansion of hard of hearing or deaf categories coming into parasport?
Absolutely. I'm all for it. I think it has to be in the right sport. It has to be in the right context. So for those who don't know, like there is already like athletic competition for deaf and hard of hearing athletes. It's the Deaf Olympics has been going on for a while, but it's always been very separate from, you know, what is established within the Paralympics. As someone with hearing loss, I've kind of done some research and looking into this myself, and I think there is definitely an opportunity to bring the deaf and hard of hearing athletes over into the umbrella of the Paralympics. But again, it has to represent a sport that would really kind of showcase the power of disability sport. So I think that will take some time, and that would be kind of tricky figuring out what sports we'd like to see the deaf or hard of hearing classifications file into, but I'm definitely open to it. But so stepping aside from the sports side of thing, I want to give a few minutes to the venues of LA, because not only did they announce the sports and the classification, they also announced the venues. Now, Nathan, there's a bit of controversy because some of these venues are very different from what the Olympic athletes are going to be competing in, especially when it came to things like the swimming categories, which is, from my understanding, it's going to be set up outdoors of the convention center in LA in the parking lot. And that's going to be where the bulk of the swimming competitions are going to be. And then the other one that really struck my caught my eye was the blind soccer, which is going to be or a soccer five-a-side, which is going to be at the at Venice Beach or one of the beaches in and around LA, and that's going to be outdoors. What do you think of these choices of venues and how they're going to play an impact on the actual competitions that take place?
The tricky part with this, and I may have to be careful what I say here, but to add context to the swimming side of things, the para swimming is happening at a smaller venue, but the Olympic swimming is happening at SoFi Stadium. It's happening at an NFL stadium, and somewhere that you could have had the Paralympics. You could have had the Paraside there too, especially you could definitely sell it out. One of the great things about swimming, and from what I saw and what I experienced in Rio in 2016, is the atmosphere is intoxicating. The atmosphere is loud, and they were getting sellouts at the Paralympic side there and in Paris just because of the atmosphere, because of the venue. And we've seen it in the past, and we've especially seen it in previous games, is that you can have Paralympic events coinciding or running while you have like a season or scheduled events, because all of these NFL teams or sporting teams may lose a week of these venues. But it's often a tricky thing too for a lot of disabilities and a lot of impairments to have to compete in the sun or compete in differentiating weather conditions, where often an indoor venue would be more substantial. And this is something that we've often struggled with, and I've even experienced as a swimmer, having to swim outdoors, swimming backstroke, where often your placement of your eyes on the ceiling is going to dictate where your body's moving. And if you have a sun or if you have something blocking your sight lines, that can become extremely difficult. I've learned that the hard way, but I couldn't even imagine what it's like for someone with a visual impairment just being ping-ponged around between the lane ropes, as that's happened at international competitions I've experienced before. And I know in the past, the IPC swimming has looked at having indoor venues. So it's very, very interesting what's happening in LA. But if you had a dream venue coming up for LA, or a dream sport to compete in a venue, would there be anywhere that you would hope to see it played, Alex?
Ooh, okay. So having a sport played in a dream venue for LA. I mean, there's so many phenomenal stadiums, football stadiums in and around LA. Like there was the Coliseum, there was the I think it's the Rose Bowl. Like, I would love one of those iconic venues to host some of the competitions. You're not seeing that on the Paralympic side. That's really a shame, especially after Paris, when you had some of these just purely stunning locations where it really felt like they celebrated what the movement was, and they felt like you were connected into the city of Paris. LA, yes, it's tied to the beaches, and some of these other these venues in and around. The one thing I will say, and I think it is important to state as well, this is going to be the first time since Rio that it's going to be a singular athletic village. So I think that may be playing a role in it, that they want to keep everything centralized into one geographic area where you're not split. Certain sports are hours away in a different city or a different part of the province or the state. They want to keep it all in and around LA. So I think that does play a factor. But yeah, I would love to see some of those iconic football stadiums be put to use for the Paralympic Games. Have the flame over like on kind of the outcropping. I think that would be truly a lasting image. Nathan, last word goes to you on it.
I think just to have, although it's an older venue, wheelchair basketball at the LA Forum would be a pretty cool event, or even have it at what was known as the Staples Center. Now I think it's the Crypto.com Arena. Would be really cool to have it in a venue or a place like that where there's so much basketball history, and to add another wrinkle, to add another flair to it with having wheelchair basketball's champions crowned in an iconic venue like that would be amazing. But seeing the Rose Bowl have some sort of five-a-side soccer would be incredible too. But there's so many great choices, so many great venues that could be definitely used for the LA Games.
Yeah, absolutely. See, and folks at home, this is what happens when you send us questions or comments. We go off on tangents. We spend whole episodes talking about it. Be sure to send us more. You can do it on our YouTube page, Parasport Nation. You can do it through Instagram, Parasport Nation AMI. For Nathan, I'm Alex. We'll catch you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to Parasport Nation. Like and subscribe to the channel to follow us now.